Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. You know, one question I ask every guest on Everyday Martial Artist is about their favorite martial arts book. And there's never been one quite like Martial Theory by Steve Perlman, described as the art of war for the martial artists. Martial Theory helps any martial artist or instructor take their understanding and teaching to the next level. And at martialtheoryU.com, you'll find a global community with instructor groups, Q&A with Steve, live events, and demonstrations to help you apply martial theory directly to your training. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Find Martial Theory on Amazon, and when you join martialtheoryU.com, use discount code EverydayMA for 20% off. That's under $20 a month for life. That's martialtheoryU.com, code EverydayMA. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts. My guest today is a lifelong martial artist, educator, and pioneer in children's martial arts development with over 3 decades of experience researching childhood development as it relates to sports, coaching, and parenting. Her groundbreaking work began with the creation of the Little Ninja Preschool Martial Arts Program, a curriculum that has been implemented in thousands of schools worldwide. Over the years, she's helped revolutionize the children's martial arts space through her innovative, age-specific SKILLZ curriculums and drills. Programs now used in over 1,000 martial arts schools across more than 24 countries, setting a global standard for excellence in child development through martial arts. Beyond curriculum design, she's a highly sought-after consultant and speaker, sharing her expertise through platforms such as SKILLZ University, the Certified Pediatric Ninja Specialist Program, and dynamic seminars focused on teaching, coaching, and parenting. She began her own martial arts journey in 1987 and now holds a 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo under former guest of the show, Super Dan Anderson, and a 5th degree black belt in ATA and an ATA World Champion title in forms. She currently resides in St. Petersburg, Florida with her family and her son, who continues to inspire her daily mission to help children thrive on and off the mat. Please welcome my guest today, Melody Johnson. How are you doing today, Melody?
I am wonderful, staying out of trouble. How are you doing today?
Other than being cold, I'm in Minnesota and we're in the middle of a blizzard warning. I think we have like 60-mile-an-hour winds right now. So other than that, I'm good.
Oh, wow.
I'm glad I'm indoors.
We are in sunny Florida, and sometimes we kind of wish for that snow, but not permanently.
I've never wished for snow ever. I don't like cold. I grew up in the wrong state, that's for sure. So, but what we do with, I mentioned you started in 1987, but what we do with all my guests, I want to know what led to that. I want to know where that first interest in martial arts came from, that first spark that kicked off your martial arts journey.
Well, it wasn't an interest or a spark. I was actually forced to take martial arts. My parents enrolled me into a martial arts program at our country club after I got expelled from my 5th grade school for pulling a chair from a girl who was bullying me. I pulled the chair from her and she fell back and broke both of her wrists.
Wow.
So my parents didn't know what to do with me and said, that's it. We're going to put you in martial arts and we're going to teach you discipline and we're going to straighten you out.
Wow. Okay. Out of all the times I've asked that question, I was not expecting that. So
I know most people would think, oh, you must have watched Karate Kid or Ninja Turtles. That got you excited. No, mine was not that case.
Wow. Okay. So then how old were you in 87, if I don't mind me asking?
I was 11.
Okay.
I was 11 years old. 11 years old, yes.
So then what parents forced you to go, once you got to the point where you could decide for yourself, what made you want to keep going? What was it about it? What had you learned and thought, I really do enjoy this?
Well, that's a good question, because for the first 8 months, I hated it. My instructor was it was the Dungeon Dojo days.
Yep.
It was at my parents' country club. So it was in this racquetball court with hardwood floors. My instructor's name was Mr. Slaughter. I am not kidding you. And he was an ex-Marine and he was intense. Right. G.I. Joe term. So, I spent a lot of time in knuckle push-up position and dead cockroach position in class because I was just into shenanigans as a younger child. I was always doing things to get myself in trouble, not with intent to hurt or anybody, but I was just a silly kid growing up and liked to make people laugh. So it wasn't until I got to my green belt level, and at mid-level we started sparring, and there was a kid in our martial arts class who was a higher rank, and he bullied my brother and I during class all the time. He was kind of like the old school Johnny from Karate Kid type of kid in class. He was high rank, very talented martial artist. And the first day we had to spar, he sparred my brother first and did a number on my brother. And so I was like, that's it, I'm going to get him back. And I still remember this day vividly. I got up, and right as my instructor said go, we were doing this point fighting little round robin, and he kicked me in the stomach and knocked the wind out of me, and I fell to the ground. And I looked over at my mother, who's constantly sitting there with her arms folded, like telling me to sit still, pay attention, one of those parents that coaches from the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at me and gave me this just mean, evil look and said, get up right now. So I got up, and my instructor said go, and I just threw the hardest, highest round kick that I could. Didn't know where it was going to land. It landed right smack on the side of his head and spun his headgear. Wow. And I looked over at my mother, and I was like, here we go again. I'm going to get in trouble for whapping this guy in the head and spinning his headgear. And I look over at her, and she goes from mean and serious to jumping out of her chair with her hands up and goes, yeah! And my instructor goes, 2 points, kick to the head. And my entire class started clapping, and we're like, yeah. And I was like, wait a minute, wait. Not only do I get to kick boys in the head as hard as I want and spin their headgear, but my mom is happy for me, and everybody's cheering for me, and I get points. This is the coolest sport ever. And from that point on, I fell in love with martial arts.
I love it. Wow. And that's actually funny, because my first ever tournament I entered when I was an orange belt back in 1993. I actually had my headgear kicked off in a tournament from a roundhouse. So that brought back some memories when you were talking about that.
That was the thing. If you could knock their mouthpiece out or knock their headgear off, then you hit them.
That is awesome. Wow. And that was only after 8 months. Okay. I love it. And I'm assuming that was Taekwondo also?
Yeah. Yes, sir. That was ATA back in the day.
Okay.
Old school ATA.
And how long did you stay at that specific school?
I stayed at that school for at least a year and a half until Mr. Slaughter got deployed again, and he went back into the military. And then I moved over to another martial arts school where I ended up getting my black belt. And I hated it, as far as the instructors and the coaches and the curriculum. I just love competing. Okay. So I think that the competition is what kept me into martial arts as long as I stayed in it, at least at that age.
Okay. And do you remember your first actual big tournament involving other schools and stuff?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. My first tournament was right after I kicked this kid in the head and spun his headgear. I looked over at my mother. I said, I want to compete. And so I remember my very first tournament. This is when I grew up in New Orleans. So the first tournament that I went to was actually in Biloxi, Mississippi. So just the fact that we traveled and we went out of state and went to this competition and we stayed at the hotel and all these other kids were competing, all of that really, that's what locked me in. And my first tournament, I remember it was girls and boys back then. Mm-hmm. And my mother had ironed my uniform, so she wouldn't let me sit down or fold my arms or anything because I would wrinkle my uniform. And I get up to do my form, and my mother comes over with wet napkins to put on the cuffs of my uniform so that when I punched and I would strike, everything would pop. And I got 2 first places in that tournament. It was boys and girls. I loved technique. I won in sparring, and it was pretty neat because I was, right now I'm almost at level 50. I turned 50 in March, but I'm 5'0" and I weigh 102 pounds. So wow. I'm very, very petite little Filipino girl. So being the small person in all these tournaments, people would get around the rings and they would cheer me on because I was so tiny compared to other people. So it was a fun experience.
So were those the only 2 options, were sparring and pattern, or did they have weapons? Did they have breaking back then?
Not back then. Not back then. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Going to ATA tournaments now and seeing there's 12 divisions. I was like, I grew up with just forms and fighting.
Yeah, I know when I first started too, that's all we had. And then it was like a couple years after I joined, they added, I did Tung Sudo at first. I think then they added in weapons. Breaking didn't come until after I left that style. And at one point, right before I left, that's when they started adding in musical forms too. So it kind of grew a lot in that same. So back then, you talked about the tournament being boys and girls. Now, in your actual school, in your class, was it pretty even boys and girls? Was it majority boys back then?
It was actually majority adults.
Really?
So this was 1987, if you think back then, and it was it was rec martial arts, if you think of it that way. So it was adults and kids combined. I was one of the only kids, and I was the only girl in my school. As a matter of fact, when I moved to the next school and I got my black belt, I was the first girl black belt under the age of 20.
Wow, man. Okay. That's a lot different than because I think where I lived, I grew up in central Minnesota, and pretty much after the Karate Kid came out, everyone added kids classes. So my first class was all kids.
Yeah. So that was in the 90s. That's, when I got back into martial arts, because I took a break when we moved to Florida, and I was in high school, and I tried a couple of different classes. And we're talking about the early 90s, probably when you first started. But back then, martial arts just wasn't cool. It was really all the dorks and geeks and weirdos, took martial arts. So I remember rolling up to my first day in high school. I was a freshman in high school, brand new to Florida, in Orlando. I went from New Orleans to Orlando. So you can imagine a massive culture shock.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. And I was telling people that I was a black belt and a national champion in martial arts, and everybody was like, whoa, and like teasing me. So I was like, that's it. I'm quitting. This is like damaging my reputation. So,
Wow.
So I left martial arts in 1990 when I moved to Florida, before Power Rangers and everything came out, and then it really started attracting kids.
Yeah. See, and I actually started in 84. I started literally
gotcha.
3 days after seeing the Karate Kid movie opening weekend.
Okay. My bad. I thought you said 90s.
No, that's when I really got into it. I started in 84, and I did that for about a year and a half, and I didn't get back into it until 1990. So.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. Started in old school Tung Sudo back in the day when they didn't use pads back then, and not even like kicking pads in class. We actually used to kick. I told this, and a few other Tung Sudo people said we did that too, but we used to kick X-ray printouts from hospitals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. I remember those. Love those. Those were fun.
Yeah, it's the only time. Must have been something from the 80s, definitely. So then the second school you went to, you stayed there. You got your black belt. After you moved, how did you find your next school? How did you choose it?
When I moved to Florida, there was no ATA school, and I really wanted to stay within that organization, or the USTA, which was the closest organization I could find, and I got my black belt. But their tournament circuit was a lot smaller, and I competed in one tournament, got a national title, which I bragged about. I'm a national champion, but the ATA was such a much larger organization, and you collect points throughout the year. You get a certain amount of points competing in regionals and a certain amount of points competing in nationals. And then the top 4 at the time in the world got to compete for world champions. So it was well earned. So when I moved to Orlando, Florida, there wasn't any ATA school. Okay. So I stopped doing martial arts for a couple of years. And it's funny how martial arts, this is a great story since we're doing the podcast, how martial arts came back into my life. On my 16th birthday, my parents gave me a car, and my mother gave me this pepper spray that I had to keep on my keychain, because she was like, you're a little girl driving a car. We don't want you to get robbed or anything. And I was like, Mom, I'm a black belt, national champion. Come on, I got this. And she's like, yeah, it doesn't work like that, Melody. So anyway, they gave me a car, and they were leaving that morning because my grandfather was sick, and they were doing a road trip to New Orleans. And I stayed with my brother, who was 18 at the time. So, back then you could do that. So anyway, I go into the cafeteria at lunchtime, and I'm bragging about my new car, and I'm showing my keychain, and my friends are like, what's that on your keychain? And I said, it's pepper spray, watch. And I sprayed it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The cafeteria clears. I sent 2 people to the hospital, a kid and a counselor. And so I find myself in the principal's office getting expelled for the second time.
Wow.
Unfortunately, they didn't know what to do with me, because my parents were halfway to New Orleans. My brother was in college. So I'm sitting in the office, and this is in Orlando, and it was right at the beginning of the winter season in Orlando. Okay. And back then, Disney would come to the high schools to hire for the winter season. So because the parks would be a lot more crowded. Now it's not the case. Disney's crowded all the time. Yeah. But back then, in the early 90s, during the winter season, they would come into the high school and hire kids for food and beverage. So there was this manager who was in the front office. Here I am sitting by the principal's office crying. And the manager who was representing Disney, who was hiring, came over to me and saw me crying crying, and she's like, what happened? And I was like, I'm getting expelled for the second time because I sprayed pepper spray. They're saying it's a weapon. And I'm telling her this whole story. And now my parents aren't there. And she said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you apply for a job at Disney and then tell your parents good news, bad news, good news, I got a job, but bad news, I did get expelled. But, like I said, I got a job. And I said, well, sure. What kind of jobs do you have? And she's like, well, we're hiring people who, they set up these little stands where you sell popcorn and Diet Coke and sodas and stuff to the kids because it gets really busy. So we want to have extra of these concession stands set up. And I was like, well, I don't want to sell popcorn and soda. I want to be Mickey Mouse. And she goes, well, you're short enough. If I had my pepper spray, I would have probably gotten her, but they take my keychain away. So she goes, well, do you have any acting experience or, performance experience? And I was like, no. And she's like, oh, no. Disney, when we hire characters, we hire people who have been in plays and have acting, dancing, singing experience and performance experience. And I was like, well, I'm a black belt and I'm a national champion. And now this is in 1992. Yep. So back then she was like, 16 years old, female black belt, national champion. She's like, that's really cool. She goes, let me call my boss and see if I can get you an audition. So sure enough, she calls her boss and he's like, yeah, bring her in. So the next day I went in and I did a 6-hour audition and I got the part as Mickey Mouse. And I worked for Magic Kingdom Entertainment and I did all the characters. And it's a little humble brag, but I was one of the best characters because of how strong I was as a black belt and the size, because the Mickey height is only 4'11" and 5 feet. Mm-hmm. So, most people are very petite, but they're not very strong. I had a lot of strength. So I did a lot of the shows like Special Magic and the Mickey Starland show. And I constantly was getting opportunities to do characters at these big events with celebrities and stuff. So after being Mickey for about 1.5 years, 2 years, we were at one of the Disney Christmas parties and Magic Kingdom or MGM Entertainment came over to the manager of MGM Entertainment came over and said, hey, I heard you're that black belt Mickey at Magic Kingdom Entertainment. And, I want to hire you to come over and do choreography for the Mickey Mouse Club and teach them some martial arts. And I hadn't been in martial arts in several years. Mm-hmm. So I was fake it till you make it. So I was like, sure, I'll come in and I do choreography and stuff. And I did some of that training for the Mickey Mouse Club. And then I was like, I guess I need to get back into the martial arts. So I was at dinner at my parents' house and we were talking about, my new job. And my mom said, I just saw an ATA van not too long ago in my neighborhood. Let's look it up and let's see if we can find the school. So sure enough, there was an ATA school that had just opened up right around the corner. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's one of the most successful ATA school owners at this time. His name is Sergio von Schmeling, and he had just opened up one school. Now he's got over 100. Mm-hmm. Like he's. So I went back in to train and do martial arts so that coincided with what I was doing at MGM Entertainment. And then the Mickey Mouse Club got canceled. Mm-hmm. So just so you know, that one wasn't my fault. It got canceled. So here I am out of a job, and I went back to Magic Kingdom to try to get my job back as Mickey Mouse. And my manager was mad that I quit and left in the first place. So I was like, great. So I'm at the ATA school, and I'm getting ready for class, and I'm bummed out. And Master Von Schmeling comes over and is like, what's going on? And I was like, I lost my job. Here's what happened. He's like, well, why don't you teach martial arts here to kids? And I was like, I hate kids because they bullied me all my life. And he's like, didn't you work at Disney? And I was like, yeah, but I was in costume and in character, that's different. So he's like, why don't you give it a try? So, I summoned my experience from working at Disney and Mickey Mouse, and I taught a class, and I just kind of utilized more entertainment than martial arts teaching. And another humble brag, but all the parents came over and said, that was such a fun class. And from that point on, I was like, I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was planning on going to college for child psychology because I didn't like kids and I wanted to try to fix them. So this was like a whole nother path. And, that's really where my career started taking off in the martial arts is after teaching that class and pulling from my experience at Disney and making it fun and exciting and falling in love with kids because I saw them in a different eye than what I saw them growing up and being a child who was bullied for my size.
Before that one class, had you ever taught at all, like assistant or anything?
Nope.
Wow.
Just taught. I taught the Mickey Mouse Club people martial arts, but I was faking it.
Definitely. Wow, that is so cool. And that's another one I always ask people about how they got into teaching martial arts. And that's such another different type story and a little more like mine, because I was pretty much, I assisted a few classes. My instructor threw me into the deep end. And one night he asked me one night about teaching a class. And I'm like, sure, I'd love to do that sometime. I think I was a purple belt at the time. And he's like, be here Tuesday night. And walked in class and there's 7, 8 students there, all higher ranked than me. I'm like, oh, this must be like an instructor class. And he's like, all right, everyone line up. And he goes, Mr. Bryan's in charge. And he walked out. I'm like, what? Yeah. So a little scary, but it was fun. But yeah. And I'm sure he talked to them beforehand and warned them, like, hey, be respectful, be nice.
That was typical for martial arts schools back then. And actually, even like, a decade or two ago, martial arts instructors just, you got your black belt or you're close to a black belt and you're there all the time. And the martial arts instructor or the owner says, all right, yeah, let's have you teach class, and you get thrown into the deep end. And in fact, that's how I make a career right now with SKILLZ Worldwide. Is we not only provide age-specific curriculums to martial arts school owners that really target children's stages of development and integrate science and neuroscience and psychology, but we also train the instructors in neuroscience, in child psychology, so they're not thrown into the deep end anymore, at least the people who we come across in our organization.
Nice. And I definitely want to talk more about that and how that was developed. But first, after that first teaching experience, what was kind of next on your journey? Did you stay and teach at that school for a while? Did you open your own school?
Yeah. So I stayed for about 4 months and then bumped into my childhood crush who I'd used to seeing on the tournament circuit. And he was at the same tournament in Panama City with his parents. And they had a very small dojo in Port Charlotte, Florida. They also owned a printing company. So it was kind of like a side hobby. Mm-hmm. And he and I, we started dating, and like within 3 months, I moved down there and started teaching martial arts. And we went from a small school with less than 50 students to 4 locations with 700 students doing close to $1 million a year in less than 4 years. And it was all from the teaching applications that I had developed from pulling from what I learned at Disney and entertainment and integrating it into martial arts and entertainment for the kids.
Wow. And at what point did you actually develop that and turn it into an actual program? I know you were using the skills throughout that time and teaching them, but when did it become its own thing?
So in 1997, I was with the World Demo Team, the ATA World Demo Team in South Korea. And one of the headmasters came up to me and said, I heard you're the Mickey Mouse instructor. He's like, I heard you teach really good kids classes. I want you to teach at the Taekwondo University. Now I try to say it in a broken Korean accent, but I can't do that. But he's like, you come teach class at the Taekwondo University. And I was like, bring it on, let's go. So we get to the Taekwondo University, which is this massive, massive facility. And it wasn't just Taekwondo. There was like ping pong. There were kids who were 4 years old playing ping pong like Forrest Gump. Wow. Like it was gymnasiums and everything like that. So he brings me into one of these gymnasiums, and it was literally a gym with like gym equipment and everything like that. And it's all of these kids, about 40, 50 kids, which I wasn't used to. But not only that, they were all under the age of 6. Now, back then, we didn't teach kids under the age of 7. I don't know if you remember, but we'd answer the phone. Shuman's martial arts. How can I help you? Yeah, I want martial arts for my kid. How old's your kid? 5. Click. Because they're like, they don't behave well. Yeah. So we weren't teaching them at that age. Our organization had a program called Tiny Tigers, which was 3 to 6 year olds that we tried to implement a year prior. And it was just a disaster because the kids just weren't paying attention. They'd run around. They were nutballs. So anyway, I'm like, I'm in trouble. Here I am teaching, 40, 50 kids under the age of 6. But I was like, let's give it a try. So I'm like, okay, kids, line up. And none of them responded. And I was like, chariot. And then they all stood up, feet together, hands by their side. And I looked over at my instructor and I was like, they don't speak English, do they? He goes, no, we're in Korea. Of course they don't. And I was like, I'm in big trouble. So I look around the gymnasium and there's all this gym equipment, hoops and cones and everything like that. And I was like, I got an idea. So I grabbed a couple of the people who were on the World Demo Team with me, and I set up a bunch of obstacle courses and games where they would jump through the hoops and then they would kick the targets, or they'd crawl into the bars and they would block with these blocker targets. And I'm running this, and my instructor finally comes over, my master, he comes over and taps me on the shoulder. He's like, okay, you need to stop now. He's like, you were only supposed to teach for 30 minutes. And I said, how long was I teaching? He said, 90 minutes. And I was like, well, why didn't you stop me? And he goes, look, and he looked over and there was older kids from the other gymnasiums who were hearing all the noise watching, and all the parents who came in who were picking up their kids were sitting there watching, and they were all laughing and having a good time. He's like, everybody was having fun, so I didn't stop you. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So the whole flight home from Korea to Chicago, which is where our layover was, it was 18 hours. All I did was write down all these games that I could play with kids that age and integrate into my martial arts classes. So when I came back, I restarted the Tiny Tiger program, and I just started doing all these play-based games. And the program got so full, and then preschools were coming up to me saying, hey, we want you to implement this in our preschools. So I started doing all that. And the only challenge was that the parents of the younger kids who were in our adult classes were complaining that I was playing games with them. They're like, I want our kid to learn real martial arts, not just play games. But it was successful for the kids who were who didn't have parents in martial arts. They were loving it. So I was trying to explain to the parents that these kids, they learn best through play, and they didn't have the skills to do martial arts. They didn't have balance. They didn't have coordination. They didn't have control or discipline or focus or any of that. So I reworked the curriculum, and I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take these game-based drills, and I'm going to help them develop the skills that they need in order to participate in traditional martial arts when they get older, when they turn 7. So I didn't want to call it Tiny Tigers because it was ATA. So I called it the Little Ninjas. And I basically, every class had a theme. One class was focus. Next class was teamwork, control, memory, balance, discipline, fitness, and coordination. And every single class was based on one of those skills, and the games were based on those skills. And then in order to pass, they had to collect a stripe for each one of those skills. So for like focus, they had to hit targets in the air. For teamwork, they had to hold the targets correctly. For control, they had to run and stop when I say stop. For balance, they had to do 5 kicks without putting their foot down, and so forth. And that's how the Little Ninja program was developed. And then I created a different requirement for each skill for every single belt level that was progressive. And it became so successful that I was also a member of NATMA. Do you remember NATMA back in the day, the National Association of Professional Martial Artists? And I was getting a cardio karate certification. You remember back when Taekwondo or Taibo was big? So NATMA had the cardio karate thing. So I did it on this cruise. NATMA had this cardio karate certification where you took a cruise to the Bahamas. And Jim Graydon, whose brother John Graydon owned NATMA. So Jim Graydon was the one who was doing the certification. And after we did that, we were hanging out on the cruise, and I think we were at the blackjack tables or whatever. And I was talking to Jim Graydon about my Little Ninja program. And he said, well, can you come to St. Petersburg and implement that program at my school? Because I was only 2.5 hours south of him. So I was driving back and forth to his school over the course of the next couple of months, implementing the Little Ninja program. And it became so successful. Jim called his brother, John. He's like, hey, you need to come to my school. You need to see this program. So John Graydon watched the class, and he was like, he goes, can we turn this into a product for NATMA? And I said, sure. So that's kind of how I got famous, I guess I should say, in the martial arts industry, is from that Little Ninja program. It ended up within a year or two in thousands of schools all around the world. And so that's what took my career to the next level with SKILLZ.
So are most schools, because I've seen a few schools in my travels that have a Little Ninja program. Is that most likely your program, or have some people
it is my program.
taken that name?
Program.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if
maybe... Well, likely, yeah. So I came up with the Little Ninjas. NATMA trademarked it. I lost the rights to it when NATMA filed for bankruptcy. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, if they're running Little Ninjas and they're using focus, teamwork, control, memory, balance, discipline, fitness, and coordination, yes, that was mine.
That's really cool. Because I've seen it at easily a dozen schools in my travels. So.
Oh yeah, it's in thousands of schools all around the world.
That is so cool. So at any point, did you ever open your own school?
Yes. So ATA, when they got wind of me doing the Little Ninja program, they got upset and were like, you can't teach outside of the organization. So you have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is you stop doing the Little Ninja program with NATMA, or choice number 2, you leave the organization. So I was like, peace out. But my husband didn't want to leave the organization, and we had 4 schools. So I walked away from the schools and started working for NATMA in St. Petersburg, and I was kind of trying to travel back and forth. And unfortunately, long distance relationships, it didn't work out, and I ended up getting a divorce and working for NATMA. And then NATMA got into a lawsuit, a litigation with Century back in the day. I don't want to get into the legalities of it, but long story short is NAPMA, John Graydon had to file for bankruptcy and he lost control of NAPMA. So I walked away from that and I just started my own consulting company called Schumann Concepts, where most martial arts schools who are running the Little Ninja program were like, we want more. And how do you train your instructors? And how do you do this? And how do you do that? So I started Schumann Concepts and started coaching on my own. And this was, as the internet was starting to become established and we had an online platform. And then finally I was like, okay, I need to open up my own school. So I opened up my own school here in St. Petersburg, Florida, called On the Mat Martial Arts. And it was more of a research and development school where I did age-specific classes. They weren't broken up by belt rank. And it was mostly play-based martial arts. So we branded ourselves as a child development center that used martial arts as a vehicle to help the children become the best version of themselves, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. So it was like therapy with martial arts. And as I started doing On the Mat, a lot of people who are running the Little Ninja program wanted to copy what we were doing at On the Mat because it was extremely successful. So through the years, I started building out more curriculums for the older age groups, and that's how SKILLZ came around. So SKILLZ became a licensing organization where we license our curriculum. Originally, I was going to franchise, but I didn't want to go through all the headaches of franchising and trade dress and so forth. And, trying to tell a martial artist that they need to change their school and their dojo was not the smartest thing that I wanted to do for my sanity. So we started licensing. And within a few years, we started licensing SKILLZ in 2013. It jumped to 500 schools within 3 years. And my son was born in 2014. So 2 years into my son being 2 and SKILLZ becoming such a global success and me traveling, I ended up selling my school to my manager here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And then I just focused primarily on SKILLZ.
Very cool. Wow. Okay. And how did you end up meeting Super Dan?
So Super Dan was one of my very first SKILLZ schools. So he ran the Little Ninja program, and then he used to come to any event that I spoke at, and we ended up bumping into each other at a Maya conference at the Super Show I was speaking at. And he asked if he can come to my school, and he flew over to my school and watched classes all day and said, this is what I want to do at my school. So he redid his entire children's martial arts curriculum and implemented it into his schools. As a matter of fact, in, I believe, 2017, Martial Arts Professional Magazine, when it still had the printed covers, printed magazines, I was on the cover of SKILLZ. They did a cover story on me, and Super Dan Anderson actually was the one who wrote the entire story. Oh,
wow. So before he became, one of your schools like that, were you familiar with him? Did you know who he was?
Oh yeah, of course. Who didn't? If you were an 80s martial arts child, you knew Super Dan, you knew Chuck Norris, you knew them all.
Nice. And then what about the public speaking? When did that start? How did that just because of all that? Or do you remember the first time someone asked you to do it?
Well, in 1999, one of the NAPMA conferences here in Clearwater, Florida, John Graydon's like, okay, I'm going to have you speak on the Little Ninjas. And we have like 7 different seminars going on at the exact same time. I mean, there were like UFC fighters at this, at this conference that were Joe Louis, all these big time speakers, Cynthia Rothrock, and they were all running their seminars. So I was downstairs in this small little area of this big convention center. And they put up these big particle boards to kind of block in my seminar. Well, my seminar, they thought I was only going to have like 30 or 40 people come in, but there was hundreds. Like they knocked the walls down and were watching me teach. And this was my very first speaking experience. And John Graydon was like, all right, I guess next year we're going to have you speak on the main stage. So so they kind of threw me out there. And then the next year they put me on main stage and there was like 2,000 people who were watching my seminar at the time. It was overwhelming, but at the exact same time, it was, ready, aim, fire, fake it till you make it, that type of stuff.
So had you ever spoken like in front of people before that?
Just as a martial arts instructor, teaching classes. So
nice.
No.
Kind of the same thing, martial arts. I was deathly afraid of public speaking as a kid. We actually had what I told people when I was in 10th grade, we had a mandatory speech class we had to take in high school where the whole semester you're supposed to give a speech a week.
Oh, wow.
I skipped every single one because I was terrified. And like the night before the last one, the teacher, as I was leaving class, she's like, if you don't give your speech tomorrow, you're failing. I'm like, that's fine. She goes, no, this is a required class. If you don't give your speech, you don't graduate. It was supposed to be a 15-minute speech on the subject of my choice. And I went home that night just terrified. And I was like watching my favorite TV show at the time, MacGyver. This was like 1990. And so I'm like, I'm going to write my speech on MacGyver. I know everything about this. And the next day in class, I went up there and pulled a crumpled up piece of paper out of my pocket, didn't make eye contact with anyone, read it word for word, and was back down to my seat in like 47 seconds for my 15-minute speech. And afterwards, she's like, I'm giving you a D-. Don't ever step foot in this room again. And it was 5 years later, I think I taught my first martial arts class. So it's changed a little.
I take it you're an introvert then.
In high school, I was probably the shyest kid in my class, but now I've been on stage now in front of 5,000 people and it doesn't faze me in the least.
Usually that's how it works, right? And introverts are the ones who make the best teachers and they make the best speakers, but you have to overcome that initial hump of getting in front of people. Because I was the same way. If my teacher said, who wants to demonstrate this math problem on the board? I was the one, don't make eye contact. Contact. If she looks at you, you're going to have to get up. And sure enough, we were always the ones that would get picked, right?
Exactly.
Which is what parents, teachers, and coaches get wrong these days is that what they don't understand is that introverts, they have a high sensitivity to dopamine. So making them get up in front of people puts their stress response system in the red.
Yeah.
So in martial arts classes, when martial arts instructors are like, who wants to demonstrate this form? Introverts aren't raising their hand, not because they need to be pulled out of the shell, but it goes against how their nervous system works. And then extroverts are the opposite. They have low sensitivity to dopamine. So they're the ones who are like, ooh, me, pick me.
Yep.
And when the teacher doesn't pick them because they don't want them to get that attention, it's going against their nervous system. So one of the things I actually teach in my instructor certification classes is that when extroverts raise their hand, it works with them if you pick them and you let them demonstrate. Who wants to demonstrate this form? The kids who raise their hand, they need that dopamine stimulation. So bring them up, let them get up, let them demonstrate and help go with their nervous system.
Yeah. Just from my experience, it's like when you pick the ones that don't want to be picked, even if they know it, they're so stressed that they're not going to know it. It's going to look like they didn't know it when they probably knew it better than anyone in the class.
Yes, their brain shuts down. So we do something like touch your nose if you know how to do the form, raise your hand if you want to demonstrate. That way you still get the introverts participating. Nice. And you work with their nervous system as well.
Okay, I like it. So over your martial arts career, have you done any weapons training?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, do you have a favorite weapon you like to train with?
Double nunchucks.
Nice. Okay.
Yes.
And have you competed with them?
Unfortunately, no, because I got kicked out of the ATA the year before they had weapons and competitions.
So you've never done like any open tournaments or anything?
No. Wait. I take that back. No, I'm sorry. My bad. I did. I competed in double nunchucks. I didn't compete for world champion. So I got kicked out the year before they had it as world champion competition.
And back then, were they doing it with music yet or just?
No, just traditional weapons, but double chuck, double stick, both any weapon I pick up. I loved it.
And in all the years you were teaching and running schools, were you ever able to bring a student from white all the way to black?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Do
you remember the first one?
Remember the first one? Oh, geez. Well, the first class that we had, that we had of our graduating black belts were all the students who started in our 3 and 4 year old program.
Wow.
So, which was really cool because when I first opened my school on the mat, I only did 6 and under. I started just because I wanted to dominate that market. And I knew that if I dominated the 6 and under market, that I would easily be able to keep them in the program into the next age group. So my programs were early skills 3 and 4, basic skills 5 and 6, core skills like 7 to 9, and then extreme skills 10 to 14 year olds. And each program has 8 different skills, but I only allowed the ones who started in the first program to get their black belt. So I remember the first graduating class that I had, it was 5 boys. They were all homies. And yeah, I cried.
That is cool. Do you know, have you kept in touch? Have most of them stuck with it?
Oh yeah. Most of them stuck with it through 3rd degree black belt till they went to college.
Very cool. That's awesome. And I was looking, I couldn't find it. I don't think, have you ever written a book? And if not, have you considered it?
I'm in the process of writing my book right now as we speak. Yes.
And can you talk about it at all? What it's going to be about? Or
it's all going to be on neuroscience and psychology and how it applies to parenting, teaching, and coaching.
Okay.
So a lot on like understanding the brain biology, how a child's brain responds to stress, how to build behavior by desire versus behavior by fear, understanding the brain bank and how we make deposits or withdrawals out of kids' brain banks every single day. Some kids show up to your martial arts school at the end of the day with an empty brain bank. bank because
Mhm.
all day long they've had so many withdrawals, and the goal is to make more deposits into their brain bank. I dive into that. I dive into the stages of development on understanding what to expect and what to not expect for kids by age. I break into how every child is different. You know, the example that I said, introverts versus extroverts, and how they respond differently in class, and how we get it backwards. So a lot of child development and a lot of integrating my experiences as a martial arts instructor and also a flag football coach in there.
And do you have a working title yet and a target release date?
I have a working title, but I'm in the process of getting it trademarked, so I can't say the name.
No problem.
But the release date is next summer.
Next summer. You'll have to let me know, because once it comes out, I'll add the link to your episode.
Oh, great. Absolutely.
So I want you to think back to that very first class where you taught for the first time in your life to now. You've been teaching all this time. Over all those years, what do you think has changed the most about your teaching style?
Understanding children's behaviors from a neuroscience level versus trying to control and manage the behaviors. Now being curious about the behaviors and trying to find the ways to help them become the best version of themselves through my teaching. So back when I first taught my first class, it was more of surviving and entertaining them and getting through the class without having any tantrums or meltdowns or any kind of disruptions. And then after that, it evolved into, I was a big time competitor, as you know, as I mentioned, and I trained over 36 world champions when I was competing in the ATA.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I favored the anomalies, and I favored the kids who had the same drive and spark and desire as I did. To when I moved to St. Petersburg and I opened up on the mat martial arts, and I had such an extensive background in child psychology by that point, really understanding how when a child has a tantrum or a child has a meltdown in class, immediately being able to discern the difference and knowing exactly what to do to help bring that child back to a regulated state in a way where I look forward to it instead of run from it or hide from it.
And if you could give one piece of advice, one tip to instructors out there who haven't seen your program, haven't done it, just to assist them in teaching kids, one top thing that you tell people, what would it be?
Get curious about the why behind the behaviors that children have in class, right? It's easy to teach kids who are good kids, but instructors tend to hit a burnout when they're dealing with the tantrums, the meltdowns, you know, those types of behaviors in class day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. In addition to that, the parents who come to the instructors with either complaints about the structure of the class or complaints about the child's behavior at home, and they want the instructor to help them. And most instructors are kind of just thrown out there and they don't have any understanding on child development, those types of behavior, those types of things. And, you know, the kids who want to prematurely quit, like a lot of times instructors just kind of give in. You know, my child wants to quit because he wants to play video games or he wants to do another sport. And the instructors who get curious about the why behind it and then find solutions are the ones who are going to dominate the martial arts industry in the children's market in particular, because that's where my specialty is, especially going into 2026. Because I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Anxious Generation, that just came out. It's talking about kids.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't read it.
Talks about how we've gone from the play-based generation of children to now the phone-based generation, and the pitfalls to what children who are heavily on their devices, what it's doing. We're in a movement deficit. Children's vestibular and proprioceptive senses are nowhere near where they were even a decade ago. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was doing an instructor certification in Chicago a couple months ago, and I said there's an epidemic where kids in preschools and early elementary schools are just literally falling out of their chairs. And everybody started laughing, and the teacher who was sitting in was like, I have that problem every single day. Kids are they're falling all over the place. And I said the reason why is because less children are out in parks and riding their bikes, and they're on their devices. So they're the crucial times, especially between 3 and 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds, preschoolers and kindergartners, that crucial time where their proprioceptive and vestibular senses are starting to be established, are not getting the training that they need. And so there's a movement deficit, but then there's also an attention deficit now going on with the devices and the heavy dopamine addiction. So again, going into 2026, the instructors who are curious about these behaviors and find the why behind it and then the how behind it, they're going to dominate. And children's martial arts is not going to be a luxury anymore. It's going to be a necessity, especially the schools that can position their business in that way. But of course, you have to deliver the results.
Agreed. Yeah. So what are your thoughts? I know, like you said, you followed Chuck Norris and stuff back then. Everyone knew who he was. I'm sure you're familiar with the program he started back in the 80s, the Kick Drugs Out of America, trying to get martial arts into the school system. And he was successful in Texas. And I know some other people I've talked to, a friend, a former guest, has been successful in California with about 20, 30 schools. Is that something, would you like to see that nationwide?
Absolutely. I was just at Chuck Norris's international training conference in Las Vegas in June. And I did 2 days of training and worked specifically with the lady who spearheads the Kickstarters programs in Texas.
Nice.
And absolutely, that's why, I don't always play the lottery, but I'm going to play it tonight because I believe it's getting up to like $1 billion. And if I win the lottery, then I'm just going to do nonprofit martial arts. That way I can really give our communities what they need without having to support my family or feeling a need, because I'm not cheap. My programs are very high dollar. So I'm only able to target the market of our industry that wants to invest heavily into what I do. Right. And I would like for it to be accessible to everybody.
That is cool. I know for years I've told my instructor, if I ever win the lottery, I'm buying you your dream school and building it.
Yes,
so
yes, I would build dream schools everywhere.
That is awesome. So over your martial arts career, is there one philosophy that's at the top of your list, super important, you keep coming back to it?
Yes, to help build behavior by desire versus behavior by fear. In the martial arts, especially growing up, you and I can agree to this, we called it the dungeon dojo days. Yep. So it was behavior by fear. If you don't sit still, you're going to get push-ups. If you don't pay it, you don't do this, you're not going to get your stripe. And it goes against the core nature of not just children, but people in general. As a matter of fact, when I started studying leadership and I wanted to really expand my leadership team in the 90s, I came across this book written by a corporate psychologist named Douglas McGregor. And he was a corporate psychologist at MIT in the 50s. And he studied corporate leadership, and he came up with these two theories. There's this Theory X corporate leader and this Theory Y corporate leader. Theory X corporate leaders believe that their employees need to be threatened, coerced, and held accountable when they don't perform in order to get them to perform at very high levels. If you don't get that TPS report to me by Friday, you're not going to get your bonus. If you don't meet your quota by the end of the month, you're not going to get that promotion. If you keep missing your quota, you're going to lose your job. And the results from those type of leaders, number one, those types of corporations were very limited in corporate growth. Number two, they had very low employee morale. And number three, they had very high employee churn rates. Now, Theory Y corporate leaders did the opposite. They believed that employees wanted to perform at very high levels, especially when they had great leadership and their bosses did it with positive support. If you get your TPS report to me by Friday, you're going to get that bonus. If you meet your quota by the end of the month, you're going to get that promotion. If you continue to meet your quota, you have job security. And those types of corporate businesses had much higher success rates, much higher employee morale, and lower employee turnover. The same goal, get the report by Friday, meet your quota, continue to meet your quota, but different approaches. And when we look at the way martial arts instructors try to build discipline in kids, a lot of times they leaned, especially in the early 90s, leaned into behavior by fear. If you don't sit still, you're going to get push-ups. So my philosophy that I always go back to is you can get a child to sit still if you understand the neuroscience behind what you're doing. When you threaten a child with push-ups to sit still, you trigger their brain stress response system in the amygdala. And the learning centers of the brain actually shut down because now they're threatened. So you're not maximizing learning and you're attaching sitting still to a fear. So what we do is we apply positive behavioral strategies in our teaching skills program to trigger dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins in the brain to get that same desired behavior in a way that makes them want to do it and it feels good. So instead of saying, listen, Brian, if you don't sit still, you're going to get push-ups. Hey, Brian, can you show me how a black belt would sit with their legs crossed, hands on their knees? Show everybody how they sit. Okay, great. Now, when I say go, I want everybody to sit like Brian. Ready, set, go. Boom. All right, everybody give Brian a hand for teaching everybody how to sit like a black belt. So same desire, get them to sit still. But now, Brian, when you hear sitting still, you remember everybody's clapping. You remember me prompting you. You remember it being a good feeling. So now what happens is when I say sit still, your amygdala is not threatened because I'm not using a threat. Your hippocampus remembers that everybody clapped for you. So your prefrontal cortex, which is the captain of the ship, knows when you hear sit still, to sit good. It's that Pavlovian theory, right? Remember Pavlov, when he would ring the bell, the dogs would salivate.
Yeah.
So I always go back to that when teaching martial arts to children, that if you learn how to build behavior by desire, they're going to embrace it and they're going to want to stand still. They're going to want to sit still. They're going to want to try their hardest. They're going to want to have focus and effort in class. And that's why skills schools are so successful. That's why skills is in over 1,000 schools in dozens of countries, because it works on a global scale. It works for every single demographic. Every kid wants to feel good. And the instructors who know how to build behavior by desire, those are the ones who are the most successful.
Nice. I like it. And the important thing is, don't forget we're using cover sheets on the TPS reports now.
I was wondering if you got the Office Space reference.
Oh, yeah. I had to mute because I was laughing. So that was good.
Awesome.
All right. How about a worst martial arts related injury? Have you ever had any bad ones?
Oh, heck yeah. The worst injury that I still suffer from today, it was a week after my 21st birthday, and I was competing at ATA Nationals in Las Vegas. And in the ATA, you compete by age, not by size. So again, 21 years old, 5'0", back then probably 92 pounds. And I was competing against the reigning world champion. Her name was Michelle Guidry, and she was like 5'8", and just a powerhouse. And I actually was competing for her. We were competing for first place. And if I would have beat her, it would have put me at first place in the rankings for qualifying for world champion competition. So we ended up going in sudden victory. And to tee this up, I had forgotten my mouthpiece. So I had to go buy a mouthpiece at the vendor in Las Vegas, and they ran out of kid mouthpieces. I know this is a joke. So I had to buy an adult size mouthpiece, which didn't fit. And this was back when the mouthpieces, you had to melt them. Do you remember? You had to trim them and melt them and everything. Yeah. So I'm wearing this adult mouthpiece that's not trimmed. I'm going into sudden victory, and it's cutting up all my gums. So I had like blood, drool dripping out of my mouth. I know it's gross. Dripping out of the side of my mouth because this mouthpiece was so big. So when we go into sudden victory, I spit my mouthpiece out on the floor. This is in the Las Vegas Convention Center. And this is like in 1996, where, the convention center was carpet. Mm-hmm. And the ref looks over and he goes, "Are you going to pick that up and put it back in your mouth?" And I looked at the carpet and I was like, "Heck no." And he's like, "All right, it's your teeth." So he jigs me. So he says go, and Michelle I go in for just a jump punch because I just wanted it over with. I'm tired. Mm-hmm. She sidekicks me right in the face and knocks out. I just spit out a mouthful of teeth, chipped several of my teeth, knocked out 4 of my teeth, and kind of broke my jaw. Wow. And I lost, but we were in Vegas for the week. So I stayed in my hotel room, 21 years old, for a whole week because I was missing teeth.
Wow.
And the 2 front teeth, or 2 kind of side front teeth that she kicked out, they still come out a couple of years, every so often, because the gums and my jaw had gotten hit so bad and it busted the bones so bad that they still come out. So yeah, that's
wow. Dang. And what are your thoughts on something like the UFC and MMA? Is that something you're a fan of? Do you watch that?
One of my first celebrity little ninja attendees was in the NATMA LA conference. Mm-hmm. I think it was in 2003. And it was this big guy, bald head, black fingernails, and with his assistant instructor. And they come up to me and they're like, I was Melody Schumann back then. Melody Schumann, little ninjas, left punch man, right punch man, left kick man, right kick man. They started like mocking me, but in a cute way. They're like, mm-hmm. We love your program. We've been running it in our school, and it's one of our most successful programs. It was John Hackelman. Nice. and Chuck Liddell.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I became great friends with them. And like, as a matter of fact, when Chuck Liddell fought Rampage Jackson at the UFC's, John hooked me up with a ticket, and I actually flew out there and went. Obviously, it didn't go the way that we wanted it to.
Yeah.
But the old school UFC was a lot of fun. I'm not into UFC anymore, mostly because I've had 4 concussions. I have an 11-year-old son. I know what concussions do for people and their brain injuries and so forth. So I've kind of fallen out of the love of that particular genre of the sport, but mostly just because my mom instincts kick in.
Yeah. It was funny you mentioned John. I literally just texted John about 5 days ago because he's going to be on the show soon. So. Oh,
sweet. Well, when you get on there, you tell him that I said hello, and you can tell him the story about how I met him in LA at the Little Ninja Conference.
I will have to do that. That is awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
Yes.
All right. I got a few fun questions we use to wrap up the show. So okay. we were just talking about MMA and the UFC. So let's say you were going to fight in the UFC. What is your walk-up music going to be? What song's playing as you're taking that walk into the octagon?
Uh, Probably Disguised by Dirty Heads.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. All right. Who are 3, 4, 5 names that you'd put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
3, 4, 5 names. Well, definitely Super Dan. Otherwise, he would disown me. Of course, Chuck Norris. You know, he's a living legend. Joe Louis, another living legend who I just absolutely admire. Cynthia Rothrock. You know, those are the ones that really stand out.
Nice. Two of them have been on the show. I've had Dan and Cynthia both on the show, and I met Joe back in the early 90s at the Diamond Nationals, and he was there like at a booth and signing autographs and stuff. So I got to have a little conversation with Joe Louis, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, he was a special person. Oh, you know, one more is Superfoot Wallace, Bill Wallace.
He's also been on the show, and he's a fellow Floridian down there. So.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I bump into him every so often here.
That's awesome. He was a fun interview, man. That guy's fun. He's funny. And just
I have
so
stories.
Nice.
I have stories, but that I'm not going to tell on the podcast, though.
I think everyone has stories about Bill Superfoot Wallace. So.
Especially when you get Bill and Joe together. Those were the fun days.
Oh, I can imagine. Wow. All right. Do you have a favorite martial arts book?
A favorite martial arts book? You know, I'm drawing a blank, but it was Bruce Lee's book.
Oh, Tao of Jeet Kune Do.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice. Great book.
I'm trying to look at my bookshelf, but I don't see it. But I have so many books.
I know. I'm the same. That's one cool thing about doing this podcast. I've added so many books to my own library, but I just don't have time to read right now because of the podcast. But yeah, I think I probably have about well over 1,000 books in my library. Probably at least 300 so are martial arts books. So
right on.
All right, this one you may or may not have an answer for. Kind of depends on the guest, but do you have a favorite martial arts video game? Did you ever get into gaming?
Oh, well, yeah, Mortal Kombat. Come on.
Nice. Nice.
Finish him.
It's most people, it's Mortal Kombat, Tekken, or Street Fighter. Those are pretty much the top 3 that people say. But every now and then I'll get, someone will throw a weird one out there that I had one guest argue that Pong was a martial arts video game. So
oh, shit.
I'm like, okay, that works.
It doesn't get any better than the fatalities in Mortal Kombat.
Yes. So now, were you more of a fan of the old school movie or the remake for Mortal Kombat?
Definitely the old school.
Yeah, same. I just,
all the way.
I couldn't get into
I'm
the new one.
Old school everything, even old school Star Wars, like the new stuff. Not for me.
See me, I prefer the old Star Wars stuff, but I still enjoy the new stuff. I mean, I'm just such a diehard fan. I mean, I saw the first Star Wars at 3 years old in a drive-in theater with my dad in 1977. So.
How funny is that? That my father worked at a drive-in theater as well,
awesome.
a drive-in movie theater. He was a projectionist, and that was my very first movie too.
That is so cool.
Synchronicity.
Wow. That is awesome. All right, how about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Favorite martial arts TV show? Well, I mean, Power Rangers.
Nice.
I mean, mostly because the late Jason David Frank was a personal friend of mine. So,
oh, man. Yeah, that one. And I was actually in the process of working out to interview him when that tragedy struck. And I was so bummed I didn't get to have that conversation with him and record it. It was, I met him once at a tournament many, many years ago. And he's just such a nice guy. And
yeah. He was a beautiful soul.
Definitely. All right. How about a favorite martial arts movie?
Bloodsport.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
That was growing up, I loved Bloodsport. And here's the funny thing is that my parents would never let me watch it. But I had a neurodiverse uncle who was in his 30s and he lived with my grandparents. So I would ride my bike over to my grandparents' house all the time and watch it with my Uncle Danny and didn't tell anybody.
Nice. We all had that cool uncle. My Uncle Pat, he was the uncle that had he had a Betamax movie collection.
Oh yeah.
That was so much cooler than VHS. But yeah, he showed me War Games. He showed me Stripes when I was like 10 years old.
Oh yes. I named some of the movies, but I incriminate myself. So
yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. This one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie. Any movie you've seen in your whole life, a favorite movie fight scene.
Favorite movie fight scene? Oh geez.
People pick Star Wars, The Princess Bride, Rocky, Bloodsport, anything.
I mean, The Princess Bride was the best.
Yeah.
I have to say, 100%.
Yeah, and definitely shout out to Rob Reiner. I mean, that was.
I was just thinking that as well.
Yep. That was a tragedy, but it's such a. I mean, I literally posted when that happened that he pretty much wrote my teenage years. I mean, I look at it. Yeah. Starting with Spinal Tap all the way through like a few good men. It's like.
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me is probably my all-time favorite movie. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Same.
So do you have a message you want to send out to those young girls out there who maybe just got suspended from school and you want to give them some encouragement in life?
So, I had this kid in my martial arts class, and his name was Sawyer, and he was one of those really competitive kids who would slam the dodgeball down when he would lose, or we would do competitions and he would get mad, or team sparring and he'd yell at his team if they lost. And his mom one day came up to me and said that she wanted to pull him out of martial arts because he was a spoiled competitive brat and she wanted to tone him down. And I said, let me tell you something. Sawyer is going to be that CEO one day, or he's going to be that Tom Brady of football. Shout out to Tom Brady because he came down to Tampa and won us a Super Bowl during COVID. And the reason why is because he hates to lose. He has such a desire to do the best he can. He has a desire to win. He has a desire to thrive and to succeed. And I said, true or false? And she's like, well, true. And I said, well, maybe not. Because if you keep telling him that behavior, that competitiveness, that desire to win is bad, he's going to attach that to his identity. And then he's going to not try hard. And he's going to limit himself because he thinks that core nature, his core identity is bad. So to every little girl out there who maybe got suspended or who's gotten in trouble and who's doing a lot of things that go against the rules, that is your core identity saying, always question the status quo. And is there something else out there that's better? And is there an identity attached to you that doesn't want to just settle for what everybody tells you have to be?
I love it. That is so cool. Melody, this has been so much fun. I love your story. I can't wait to read your book when it comes out. And you should do a TED Talk sometime also. I think that'd be really cool.
It's all percolating in my hippocampus right now. I just need to get it out.
Awesome. I love it. But seriously, I truly appreciate your time. This has been so much fun. And I think the listeners are really going to love this.
Yes. Well, likewise, thank you for the opportunity.
Wrap up today's episode by taking your own training to the next level with Martial Theory by Steve Perlman, the book that's redefining martial arts thinking. Find Martial Theory on Amazon today. Join the worldwide movement at martialtheoryu.com, where you'll find Q&A sessions, live events, and direct guidance from Steve himself. Use code EverydayMA for 20% off for life. That's martialtheoryu.com, code EverydayMA. Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.